Hello everybody, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, your host here at Crimes Untold. And today we're going to be discussing the true crime case of Brandon Teena. So if you've never heard of the case of Brandon Teena, there is a very well executed movie called Boys Don't Cry that came out, and Hilary Swank actually plays the character of Brandon Teena in the movie. And she won an award for playing this role. Man, I remember watching that movie, and I probably shouldn't have at the age I was when it came out, but it really taught me a lot about people and how quick people are to misunderstand, how quick people are to just judge those who are different from them. So that's really what this is. So Brandon Teena, let's just, if you watch my Gwen Rougeau video or my video on Matthew Shepard, these three cases are ones that I specifically put off from last year that it wasn't the right time to cover. And I even filmed a Gwen Rougeau video last year. I was going to put it out. It was going to be my last video of Crimes on Pride Month, but I felt it would be better coming out this year. So let's get into this case, shall we? So December 31st is typically a happy day for most people, or for most in general. But it's the last day of the year. Everyone is out celebrating, but that wouldn't be the case for Brandon Teena. Oh no. Brandon Teena was raped and murdered in Humboldt, Nebraska on December 31st of 1993. Brandon was a trans male whose orientation was found out about, which caused his death. So Brandon in 1992 underwent an evaluation due to his orientation, and it was deemed that he was going through a sexual identity crisis. This was brought up due to Brandon starting to transition to being a male, and his mother did not approve of this, what he was doing whatsoever. She also didn't approve of his girlfriend. His girlfriend's name was Heather at the time. After his evaluation, he was committed to Lancaster County Crisis Center to make sure that he was okay. And he was put under a 72-hour psych hold. He would be released after that hold, and he began therapy. So each session, his sister Tammy, who plays an important role in the movie as well, also in this case, or his mother were present at these therapy sessions. So the therapy seemed to be helping because he started to open up about his sexuality and the fact that he was raped. But the sessions would abruptly end just 2 weeks after they started. So in 1993, Brandon moves to Falls City, Nebraska, and this is where he officially becomes Brandon Teena. He moves in with a girl named Lisa Lambert, who is important, so please remember this name, and begins dating her friend Lana Tisdale, who was 18 at the time. Brandon begins speaking to a man named John L. Lauder and Marvin Thomas Nissen, who went by Tom. So remember, Marvin is Tom, and then there's John Lauder. Just a few days after his birthday, he is arrested for forging checks. Lana ends up bailing Brandon out of jail, but this is when she learns that Brandon is trans, due to him being locked up under his female name and he's also in the female section of jail. So during the conversation about his gender, Brandon speaks out about how he is a hermaphrodite and is anticipating a sex change. Ultimately, they end up staying together. But Brandon's problems would start with them running his birth name in the local paper and having his mugshot with it. This is when his friends found out about it, Tom and John. So on Christmas Eve of 1993, Tom and John end up grabbing Brandon and force his pants down. With doing this, it proves that he is a woman. They also force Lana to look at Brandon's privates. John and Tom then force him into a car after physically assaulting him and bring him to a remote area in Richardson County. And this is by a meat packing plant, in which they proceed to gang rape him and beat him. Following the rape, they then return to Tom's home, where they make Brandon clean off any evidence. Brandon takes this opportunity to escape through a window, and he runs to Lana's house, thinking that he would be in a safe place. Lana makes him file a police report, even though John and Tom told him not to go to the police or they would silence him. Brandon was brought to the emergency room, in which they did a rape kit, but this kit would be lost, like many do. Brandon was questioned, and it's during this that the sheriff, Charles B. Lau, or Laux, it's Laux, became intrigued with his trans status more so instead of the rape allegations. Brandon would find the questions that he was being asked as rude, and he would refuse to answer any more questions. It's during this time Brandon is hiding from Tom and John, and they try to find him, but so they would end up being brought in to talk to the police while they're looking for him. The same sheriff then questioned these men. This part pisses me off so much. So he then would question John and Tom and go on to say, what kind of person was she? He then would say, the first time we arrested her, she was putting herself off as a guy. He also refused to arrest him because of this. So he refused to arrest two guys, even though he has a person saying that these two raped them. Yeah. The sheriff should have arrested them for corrective rape. Corrective rape is a hate crime in which someone is targeted due to their sexuality, but instead he did nothing. Around 1 a.m. on December 31st of 1993, this is when John and Tom would drive to Lisa's house, and they demanded to know where Brandon was. Lisa refused, but Lisa refused to tell them where Brandon was, but they started to search the house, and eventually they would find Brandon. He was under a blanket at the foot of the bed. John and Tom then would ask if there's anybody else in the home. There was a man named Philip who was dating Lana's sister in the home at the time, and it's after this is when they would shoot Brandon in the stomach. Tom then would go on to say that he saw Brandon twitching and then asked John for a knife. With this knife, this is when Tom would stab Brandon in the chest to make sure that he was dead. Right after this is when they would find Philip and Lisa, and then they would shoot Lisa in the stomach, not once, but twice. They then would take Philip into the living room and then proceed to shoot him 2 times. For some reason, they would go back to Lisa, and then they shot her a few more times. The men then would run away like cowards and dump the weapons in a river far from Falls City. The men would be arrested soon after, and Tom would flip on John, thus sending them to the river sending them and the police to the river, and they would find the murder weapons for the crime. Tom would testify against John, and he got a lesser sentence, but the sentence was life in prison. John was sentenced to the death penalty. Both have appealed their convictions, but still remain with the sentences they had. So Brandon unfortunately was buried. Let's try that again. Brandon unfortunately was buried not with the right name. His mother was determined that his headstone show his birth name, which I find very rude, and it's cruel and unusual punishment. Brandon Teena was Brandon Teena. He was himself. If you as his parent can't recognize that there's a serious issue with you or with the whole situation if you can't accept it. Also, another mistake that is often showed is that Brandon was lesbian or is mistakenly identified as a lesbian because he wasn't on HRT or had gender reassignment surgery. If you are in the process of transitioning, you are still a trans male or trans female, whichever you identify as. So there's no reason to further put more labels on them. He was a trans male and dating a woman. Thus, he's straight by logic. So for me, for instance, I am straight. I prefer men. I am married to a male. So thus I am straight. If I was a trans male and I was married to my husband, I then would be homosexual because it's male and male. Logic. Why there's not logic in this world, I don't know. But thus, everybody likes to put things, label things, misconstrued things, whatever. So like I mentioned before, there is a very powerful movie about this case, and that is Boys Don't Cry, and Hilary Swank played them. I highly recommend anybody that's watching this video, you need to go watch that. So I wanted to make this clean, quick, precise, get to the point about talking about this case. That way it wouldn't hurt my brain more than it does thinking about this case, because the more I talk about it, the more I replay the different reenactments of what happened. So I hope you guys learned something from this case, and I will see you guys in my next video.